Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, this is the second group and we would like to discuss about the third material for introduction to criticism entitled Mimesis as recreation and the classification or categorization of literary genres. And these are some topics we would like to discuss. The first one is the relationship between music and poetry, the concept of imitation as recreation, imitate the nature, the three kinds of imitation, comedy, tragedy, and epic poetry, the 6 elements of tragedy, the concept of catharsis, and the last thing is the moral purpose of the character.
Describe about mimesis as recreation and the classification or categorization of literature genres include on the topic discussion. First is the relationship between music and poem. Poem and music are literary works which build with the emphasis on the artistic value and the message conveyed into the different word which has a meaning implied in it. Poem is art of combining sounds and words in language which remind the impressions and overflow the feeling. Music is closely related to poem because poem is inspired by songs such as hymn and rhythm. Then songs produced by music is one way to create beauty in poem as well as to deepen meaning and feelings. In this case, it was exemplified the epic poem and tragedy poem as well as comedy poem. There are various relationships between music and poem. A. The music used accompaniment of a poem. B. Putri, poem sung with rhythm and melody like songs. C. Poem inspired by Greek songs and choir. For the example is dithyrambic poem. Dithyrambic is a lyrical poem in the form of a Greek choir. This poem is an ancient Greek hymn sung in honor to Dionysus, who was Greek god at the Dionysian festival, and it was accompanied by music. 2. The concept of imitation as recreation. Mimesis comes from the Greek, which means imitation. Aristotle, who was Plato's student, described the idea is the reality. An imitation of that idea is just a copy of the reality. The poet imitates the copy, hence is imitation of imitation. Aristotle proclaimed that the poet imitates the ideal reality, not the mere shadow of things. He creates something new according to his own idea of it. The mimesis didn't merely copy the reality. It is a creative process to produce a new product or called a recreation. Artists and writers produce a new form of sensory reality that they get because humans are given the intellect to create a new idea. Aristoteles argues the art is imitative, the rep or the representative of life. This imitative quality fascinates Aristotle. He devotes much of the poetic to exploring the method, significance, and the consequences of this imitation of life. It was the creation of reality. The poem and author are not mere copier. They are creator. They create a new world which has a different from the existing world. They create the poetic truth in their creation. Number 3. Imitate the nature. The poem imitation is an analogy of reality, which is the process of a form is manifested from matter by nature. The poem takes a form of nature and receives it into different matter. The poem is thus an imitator and a maker. An imitation in effect is a kind of making. The imitation in the poem discovers the ultimate form of an action. Nature is full of change, chaos, and cycles, but art can also search for what is everlasting and the first cause of natural phenomena. Aristotle wrote about the idea of 4 causes in nature. First, the formal cause is like a blueprint or an immortal idea. Second is cause the material cause or what the thing is made out of. The third is the efficient cause, that is the process and the agent by which the thing is made. Fourth, the final cause is the good or the purpose and end of a thing, known as telos. Aristotle poetic is often referred to as the counterpart to this Platonic conception of poetry. Poetic is his treatise on the subject of mimesis. Aristotle was not against literature as such. He stated that human beings are mimetic beings, feeling an urge to create text or art that reflects and represent reality. Then number 4 is three kind of imitation. There is still a third difference, the manner in which each of these objects may be imitated, for the mean being the same and the object the same. The poem may be imitated by narration, in which case he can either take another personality or speak in his own person unchanged, or he may present all his characters as living and moving before us. A. The meaning of imitation. The means with epic and tragedy poem, as also comedy, dithyrambic poem, and most flute playing and lyre playing are as rhythm, language, and harmony used. B. The object of imitation. The object of imitation in poetry are men in action. These men may be either better or worse than the real-life man. In poetic imitation, they are ideal. They represent the real world. C. The manner of imitation. The manner of imitation also different from one art to another. The manner of poetic imitation either narrative or dramatic. That's all I can say. I will give next material to my friend.
So the first one is comedy. Aristotle defined comedy as one of the original four genres of literature. In general, is defined by Aristotle as a mimesis for imitation of life. Comedy is the third form of literature, being the most divorced from a true mimesis. Aristotle in his Poetic states that comedy originated in Phallic songs and that, like tragedy, it began in improvisation. Aristotle thought that comedy was generally positive for society, since it brings forth happiness, which for Aristotle was the ideal state, the final goal in any activity. For Aristotle, a comedy did not need to involve sexual humor. A comedy is about the fortunate rise of sympathetic character. Aristotle divided comedy into three categories of subgenres: verse, romantic comedy, and satire. On the other hand, Plato thought that comedy is a distraction to the self. He believed that it produces an emotion that overrides rational self-control and learning. And then about tragedy, Aristotle said that tragedy is an imitation or mimesis of an action that is serious, complete, and of a certain magnitude, through pity and fear, effecting the proper purgation or catharsis of these emotions. He determines that tragedy, like all poetry, is a kind of imitation or mimesis, but adds that it has a serious purpose and uses direct action rather than narrative to achieve its ends. Tragedy is an imitation, not of man, but of action and life, of happiness and misery. And life consists of action, and its end is made of activity, not a quality. And the last one about epic.
To Aristotle, an epic is a narrative poem written in heroic hexameter. Epic represents the life of an entire period and relates an action concerning the fortunes or destiny of a nation. Epic can be greater in length than tragedy. Unlike tragedy, an epic action should have no limit in time. It is the special advantage of epic that it may be of considerable length. In tragedy, it isn't possible to represent several parts of the story as taking place simultaneously. Epic poetry, on the contrary, is able to represent several incidents that are taking place simultaneously, and if these incidents are relevant, they increase the gravity of the poems and also relieve the poems of monotony and dullness. Next, about the 6 elements of tragedy. The first one is plot, emphasizing that tragedy is first and foremost the representation of actions and not of characters. Aristotle makes the remark that many contemporary tragedies do not succeed in their characterizations, but are still tragedies. The tragic effects comes from the plot and especially from the peripeteia, the reversal of the situation in which the characters find themselves, as well as from scenes of recognition. The second one is character. Character is second in importance after plot. Tragedies depict character as they relate to the action, which is the main object of representation. Characters represent their moral qualities through the species assigned to them by dramatists. Third is thought. Thought comprises both the rational processes through which characters come to decisions, as represented in the drama, as well as the values put forward in the form of maxims and proverbs. Diction. Diction has already been defined as the metrical composition of the play, the way language is used to convey the representation. And then next about song. Music is described as an embellishment of language. The lines assigned to the chorus in a tragedy are usually conveyed in song accompanied by rhythmical movement. And then spectacle. Aristotle lists spectacle last in order of importance, pointing out that the power of tragedy is not fully dependent upon its performance, or we can read a tragedy and still appreciate its message, and that the art of the spectacle really belongs to the set designer and not to the poet.
For the next topic is the concept of catharsis in tragedy. Catharsis in real meanings explain importance of tragedy. In Aristotle's eyes, tragedy is the purgation of emotion such as pity and fear that defines concept of catharsis. Catharsis means purification and refinement. We find peace because of harmonization we face after outlet of emotions. It purifies our hearts. We feel the same after watching every tragedy, whether it is Othello, Hamlet, or any other from the past like Oedipus Rex. A tragedy always purifies our soul with a touch of refinement. It can also be referred as a homeopathic treatment. Catharsis, the purification or purgation of the emotion, especially pity and fear, primarily through art. In criticism, catharsis is a metaphor used by Aristotle in the Poetics to describe the effects of true tragedy on the spectator. The use is derived from the medical term catharsis, from Greek purgation or purification. Aristotle states that the purpose of tragedy is to arouse terror and pity, and thereby affect the catharsis of these emotions. He His exact meaning has been the subject of critical debate over the centuries. The German dramatist and literary critic Gotthold Lessing held that catharsis converts exhaust emotion into virtuous dispositions. Other critics see tragedy as a moral lesson in which the fear and pity excited by the tragic hero's fate serve to warn the spectator not to similarly tempt by providence. The interpretation generally accepted is that through experiences fear vicariously in a controlled situation, the spectator's own anxieties are directed outward, and through sympathetic identification with the tragic protagonist, his insight and outlook are enlarged. Tragedy then has a helpful and humanizing effect on the spectators or reader. And then for the last topic is, what is the moral purpose of the character? The English word character is derived from Greek karakter, which was originally used of a mark impressed upon a coin. Later and more generally, character came to mean a distinctive mark by which one thing was distinguished from others, and then primarily to mean the assemblage of qualities that distinguish one individual from another. In modern usage, this emphasis on distinctiveness or individuality tends to merge character with personality. We might say, for example, when thinking of a person's idiosyncratic mannerisms, social gestures, or habits of dress, that he has personality or that he's quite a character. However, the philosophical use of the word character has a different linguistic history. At the beginning of a book of the Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle tells us that there are two different kinds of human excellences: excellences of thoughts and excellences of character. His phrase for excellences of character, ethikai aretai, we usually translate it as moral virtues or moral excellences. The Greek ethikos or ethical is the adjective cognate with ethos or character. When we speak of a moral virtue or an excellence of character, the emphasis is not on mere distinctiveness or individuality, but on combination of qualities that make an individual the sort of ethically admirable person he is. This entry will discuss moral character in the Greek sense of having lacking moral virtue. If someone lacks a virtue, she may have any of several moral vices, or she may be categorized by a condition somewhere in between virtue and vice, such as continence and or incontinence.